Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Neighbors Helping Neighbors podcast, brought to you by the Robertson County Democratic Party. I'm Kaylee, here with my co-host Morgan.
Hello.
And our apologies for being out last week, but we are back. We are here. Not a whole lot of events updates to talk about, just our typical reminders about our Wednesday protests from 8 to 11 outside the Robertson County Sheriff's Office to protest ICE, and then our weekly Saturday protests from 1 to 3 on the corner of Tom Austin and Memorial, and that's the Springfield Speaks series, just to go out, protest anything and everything that is on your mind these days. You will notice if you're watching on YouTube, we do not have our typical laptops notes in front of us. We thought we'd take a little bit of a different approach with today's episode, a little less headline-y, data, numbers focused, and more just have a conversation between the two of us today, just to kind of change things up a little bit. We probably won't do this every time, but just kind of wanted to chat today about our topic of the week, and just make it more of a conversation. But anything to add before we get into it?
Yeah, just it is good to take a break every once in a while, because trying to chase the news headlines, especially as the news cycle has truncated itself into sometimes less than a day between new, weird, and scary events, it feels good to just kind of sit back and take stock, talk about what everything means.
Yeah,
What I'm saying.
talk about it more just from a high level perspective than getting into some of these nitty gritty details. And before we do that, I actually forgot to mention, I did want to throw this out there at the top of this podcast. If you didn't catch it, our last episode, so that would have been from 2 weeks ago, was Morgan interviewing Joshua Sales, who is a candidate for Tennessee's Congressional District 7. At the time that we scheduled that interview, Joshua was the only candidate for that office, and then all of the redistricting happened, and so now we have some additional candidates for that seat that are a part of District 7. So just wanted to make you all aware. If you haven't watched that episode, go back and watch it. It was a great discussion with Morgan and Josh. But also, now that we have some new candidates on the ballot, we are in the process of reaching out to them and getting things scheduled. So keep an eye out. Hopefully we'll have everyone else on the podcast to give you some insight into all of the candidates, but before the election, or the primary election in August. So wanted to throw that out there. But back to the discussion for today, as it were. I actually like that you brought up, with all of the ever-changing headlines and news cycles, it sometimes feels so hard to keep up with everything. I think part of that, and getting into what we're going to talk about today, part of the reason it feels so hard to keep up with everything is because there's so much misinformation out there, and information either intentionally designed to be misleading, or just kind of by the nature of the times that we live in is accidentally misleading. But that we wanted to get in today, just why it sometimes feels so hard to know what is the truth, and what, when you read a headline, how accurate is that headline? And even when you read the article, now I feel like, at least for me, I'm so hyper aware, even more than I used to be, of which news outlet is publishing this, which journalist is writing this, what are their inherent biases in this article. Like, I am no longer living in an age, I feel like, where I can just read an article and take it at face value and say, okay, yes, this is true because a reputable news source reported on it.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I can't say that about most news outlets anymore.
Yeah, and most definitely what people would call the mainstream media nowadays, which is your major cable network news conglomerates. I'm talking Fox News, CNN, ABC, CBS, MS, now called MS Now, used to be MSNBC. All of these networks, ever since Fox News got sued for lying and essentially used the defense of, well, we are not a journalism company, we are infotainment, so you can't sue us for lying. It's felt like all of the major cable news organizations has taken that as a playbook, and now to greater or lesser extents peddles in biases, misinformations, lies by omission, playfully selecting which sources to show at which times. Fox News is especially good at that one.
Mhm.
And we're just now in an era where not only is trust in journalism at an all-time low, but the ability to spread misinformation is at an all-time high.
Mhm.
Now, when the internet came along, and don't get me wrong, misinformation has been a bad thing for a long time. I think there's a real old saying that goes something like, a lie has gotten halfway around the world by the time the truth is put on his shoes.
Mhm.
So we've had plenty of problems with nowadays what we call misinformation. The old terminology for it was just lies.
Or gossip or rumors,
Yeah.
whatever you wanna call it.
Scuttlebutt, malarkey,
Mhm.
et
We got a
cetera.
lot of fun words for
Yeah.
it.
The Irish call it blarney.
Yes.
So, and but the internet, not only did the internet democratize information, but the internet also democratized who is the authority on what is right and wrong, which has essentially broken our systems for determining what is right or wrong. Like social media, in my opinion, is one of the big
Mhm.
culprits on that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, just look in the past, what you have to keep me honest here, what, maybe like 3 to 5 years, how many social media CEOs have come under fire for various decisions about like fact checking on their platforms and like the whole community notes versus social media companies just outright banning users for saying certain things like
Yeah.
we're in this constant battle of, do we allow this misinformation to spread because it's technically freedom of speech, or do we put a stop to it because of the dangers that spreading misinformation can have, but then we piss a bunch of people off because we're telling them they're not allowed to say certain things.
Yes. And from what I remember, legally, if it's at least on a social media platform, technically the social media platform is the private property of
Mhm.
whatever
Yeah.
social media, whatever owns that social media company. So, and that's where you oftentimes get the back and forth battles over free speech on social media, because not a lot of people understand that when you're on Facebook's private property, i.e., Facebook, and they decide to take a post down that's not infringing on your free speech,
Mhm.
that is the private property saying, no, you can't be here if you're going to say that.
Yeah.
But because nowadays we don't have the old fashioned public square anymore, which is what the First Amendment was really kind of designed around, which was not letting the government inhibit everyday's people's ability to all gather together and speak their minds in a centralized location, i.e., the public square. The idea of the public square. Literally, way back in the day, it was just the center of the town that was a square, and everyone would know to meet up at a certain time to talk about whatever the hell was going on. But nowadays, those are now social media networks. Now, we don't go to our neighbors or go to a certain location in town to find out what's happening anymore. We dude up our smartphones and we look on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever your poison is.
Well, I I feel like there are some issues with that are obvious, but there are also some issues with that people maybe just don't think about as much or don't recognize as much when thinking about misinformation, or just the abundance of information that we do have in situations that you're talking about in history. Like, you had, what, maybe a couple hundred people max in your town square and all
Yeah.
the things you were talking about were things about your town that impacted you and your neighbor
Yeah.
directly.
Well, past a certain point, the town square was a physical location
Yeah.
of so many square meters. You could only fit so many people in
Yeah.
it. So,
Whereas when our town square is now Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, suddenly your town has millions, if not tens of millions of people in it, and you're all talking about things that really have nothing to do with each other. What we're talking about, that's why this is, we try, for the most part, we try and always bring our topic back to Robertson County or Springfield or Greenbrier, or, just like to our local area, because that's what matters to us, that we need to talk about how it impacts Robertson County and Springfield in our day to day lives. Why does it matter if I go on Facebook and comment about something that's happening in freaking Colorado? Like, sure, it's maybe interesting to be aware of what's going on. And I'm not saying it's not important to be maybe somewhat informed of what's going on in other places in the world. But my opinion on what's happening in the local government of Denver, Colorado, really should have no impact on what actually happens in Denver,
yeah.
Colorado.
And that leads to the reason why we're really having to talk about this is because with social media and the internet, that has obliterated the hard distinction between local news and national news because now it's all mixed together under the whims of whatever social media algorithm, which I'll
Mhm.
get to in a minute, um, which social media algorithm directs what you see and what you hear.
Mhm.
So, unfortunately, national news is now all local news, and
Yeah.
local news can become national, and it's all mixed together on the internet based off of what that platform's algorithm thinks will make the most money off of you by showing you. And I guess that's my first big point about all of this stuff on social media is that it's all curated. This isn't some natural system that is this isn't some natural system of back in the day when Facebook was first created and when MySpace, if any of my old dinosaurs out there remember MySpace, where you just got random stuff from friends you followed. Now there is a lot of code behind the system looking at your decisions and what you click on and what you find interesting, and it has one mission. How much advertising revenue can I make off of this person? And how long can I keep them retained onto the platform? That is the algorithm's mission. And so your news, your information, and whether or not you are shown factual things or unfactual things is dependent upon what that algorithm thinks it will make money doing.
And I mean, really, I mean, I'm not saying some profound statement. I think everyone listening to this podcast probably knows this and is aware of this. But the way in which social media sites get you to stay on their platform and keep scrolling is, I mean, basically rage bait.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not happy views and, good news doesn't keep you scrolling. It's the getting in, comment fights with people or watching, doom
Yep.
scrolling, watching the same video over and over again of, something that you disagree with and getting mad at, all the people that do agree with what's being said in the video. Like we I mean, it sucks. We know how it works and yet we all still, fall victim to falling into that hole, but I think it should anyway speak to why misinformation still exists at the level that it does.
Yeah.
Like it exists because that's what sells. That's
Yeah.
what makes money.
And what also social media does that really helps the misinformation is it flattens truth and lies onto the same playing field, where a Facebook post talking about a certain scientific method or scientific knowledge that we have found, a truth, it gets the same type of platform. It gets the same type of little metrics as someone talking about the earth being flat, or someone talking about how the dinosaurs built the pyramids, or something else that's just absolutely patently untrue, but could affect somebody who does not have the education, experience, or mentality to, know that that is not true. And the big problem with and that's that flattening, and mixed in with the algorithm and the fact that negative information sells better than positive information, which leads really to lies sell better than truths,
Mhm.
because the truth is often messy and complicated and has some exceptions here and there, especially in politics. Since this is a political podcast, in fact, that was one of the things that when I was in college, one of my professors told me was, if something that somebody is telling you is short, sweet, and to the point, it is probably also wrong in some way. So, what it does is it's really created a entire set of platforms online that helps misinformation accelerate far more than the truth ever can. And it allows all of us to participate in it. There is no giant, overwhelming government entity in some back room somewhere. This isn't some big conspiracy. This is a system driven by money and driven by the larger capitalist advertising system that we have, that is essentially lying to our faces the entire time, because unfortunately, lies get more clicks than informational content.
Well, and at some point, the there's the line of, I mentioned earlier, talking about whether the misinformation was intentional or just accidental.
Yeah.
At some point, the intention becomes so strong that then the misinformation just turns into propaganda.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've heard it before, but we'll say it here: no one is immune to propaganda. Like
Nope.
that, anyone and everyone can and probably has been influenced by propaganda at some point in their lives. And that's not to say that all propaganda is bad. Like we were having this discussion at home the other day, that I feel like the word propaganda has such a negative connotation to it because of World War II and everyone always referring to things that happened as Nazi propaganda. And not that that is the wrong word to use, but that has now, I think, become our association to the word propaganda,
Yeah.
when it can be used for good intentions, even if in that example it was for bad intentions.
Yeah.
Like, it is not necessarily a bad thing to be influenced by propaganda. It just depends on what they are trying to propagandize you into.
Yeah, the definition of propaganda, paraphrased, is essentially using information itself to manipulate you to make a certain decision. That is propaganda. It can be lies, it can be truth, it can be a mix of lies and truth. As long as it is influencing you to make a decision, that is propaganda. In World War II, we used plenty of anti-Nazi, pro-American propaganda on our side. Heck, we even had Disney and Mickey Mouse making war films about how the Nazis are bad and how you should buy war bonds, like, because they needed those war bonds to fund the war effort. And in the end, a lot of Americans probably wouldn't think of that era of TV programming as bad and would even see the necessity of it. But then you put it in stark contrast to the propaganda of Nazi Germany, talking about the great Aryan race and how the Jews were a parasite on their society and how they all needed to be eliminated to bring in the new, Nazi golden age. Both the American and Nazi propaganda was propaganda, but Nazi propaganda to was designed to create different outcomes than American propaganda was, and have had much, much different levels of impact on their society. Mainly negative impact because, well, over 2 million Jews died. Let's just be completely honest with you. While on the American side of things, by the time we got out of World War II, we were an industrial powerhouse and one of the only nations that hadn't been blown up in that war. So we very much came out on top. And part of that was all of the propaganda telling women to go work in the factories and telling men to buy war bonds and telling young men to go sign up for the army and telling people working to go save up and plant victory gardens in their yard to lift the burden off of the food supply so that it could, supply the expeditionary fleets going over there. Propaganda in and of itself is a neutral term, and it is a tool, and it is how you use that tool that makes it good or bad. And that's the thing. On social media, now everyone has the ability to make their own propaganda.
Yeah.
And I think that's an issue because when you tie, this is the big issue that my mind goes to a lot, is when you tie together the financial incentive of the algorithm and the fact that most of these social media platforms will pay you if you're popular enough. And that payment is pure commission based off of how many ads run on how many of your videos. It leads to an incentive purely to make whatever kind of propaganda gets you more advertising revenue and more dollars. That's what they all refer to on YouTube as finding your audience and such, which is, and especially in news and political commentary, feels like all the Joe Rogans, Tim Pools, Hasanabis, like they have all used the tool of propaganda to create their own narrative and angles to capture their audience and make their money. They're not telling you these things because they have some burning passion to make sure you're informed and they want to do better by the nation by informing people. No, they want a bigger paycheck. And the things that they're saying, they have been told by online suites on YouTube that show them statistics and graphs and managers and people in the know of the industry that doing the things that they are doing will make them more money.
The only thing I see what you're saying, and I don't disagree necessarily. The only thing I would maybe push back on you on, sorry, there's a weird way to say that. The only thing I would push back on, I think, is that they don't have a passion for doing it and that they're doing it just to make money. I think especially the more like independent people
Mhm.
like Hassan Piker, or even like to go to the other side of the aisle, like a uh I almost said the wrong name. What's his face? Like a Tucker Carlson,
Yeah.
who maybe, I know Tucker used to work for Fox News, but now being kind of, their own independent, they're just running their own shows. Like, I think they do have some passion in them to talk about this kind of stuff and to spread information about it. It's just the information that they are spreading is always going to be biased towards their own personal beliefs on
Oh, yeah.
on both sides. Both Hassan and Tucker Carlson are going to do that just on the left versus the right. And that doesn't make it, unless a talking head's intention is to purposefully lie and to purposefully state things as fact that they know are not fact. I don't necessarily have a problem with them wanting to make a little money. Like, play the game, do the YouTube algorithm, do your thumbnails the way and do your clickbaity titles to get people to click on your videos. Like, we can't say we haven't done that before with some of our episode titles of like trying to make it an interesting, grab your attention to click on it. The problem becomes is when those audiences that listen to all of these talking heads take what they are saying as fact rather than listening, taking in the information, what they had to say, and then using that information to either go do your own research or form your own opinion. Like, we are in a day and age where you cannot just blindly trust the people that are popular. And
Yeah.
maybe, that maybe that used to be true, and we're kind of like, especially older people are still maybe hanging on to any remnants of like that kind of society that they're used to living in, where you could trust what you read in a newspaper or could trust, what you heard from your neighbor down the
Yeah.
street. But when we have literally everything at our fingertips with our phones, like y- you you just can't trust everyone, because, and especially with AI now, like you cannot take anything at face value,
Yeah.
really.
We're really in kind of a second age of so-called yellow journalism because as I remember, the reason why older people trust the old media informational system as much as they did was because before that era, there was an era of what was called yellow journalism, which is another way of saying putting lies on paper back when newspaper agencies, which was the hot new thing of that time period,
Hmm.
could just say whatever they wanted. There was no laws around whether or not a newspaper could lie or not, or what it had to label itself as if it was lying. And so, because of that, you had all sorts of lies spewing out of the newspapers purely so that they could make money. Like, if the
Hmm.
truth wasn't selling that good that day, they'd make up a lie. And I think I even remember that it got so bad that it almost led to warfare on a couple of occasions of newspapers lying about certain nations doing certain things to the United States or to ships that are US ships and people running with it and it almost causing public panics.
Hmm.
It was a bad enough era of at that time misinformation that the federal government made all sorts of laws essentially saying if you are a journalist you cannot lie to people, and if you are a journalistic institution, if you do news, then you have to try your best to not lie and at least show your sources if you don't know if what you're reporting on is a lie or not.
Hmm.
And that era mixed pretty nicely with television because we updated the laws as time moved on. And we got a pretty rigid system of news information, but a system of news information where it was very easy to spot if someone was lying or not.
Yeah.
And the internet has broken that apart once again. A new technology brings us into an unknown era and period, and now we're entering another period of yellow journalism because news and information on the internet is not regulated by anything. You're kind of seeing a pattern here
Hmm.
where we get a new form of informational technology. There are no laws saying what you can do with it. It causes a whole bunch of lies to get spread for mainly monetary gain, but also all the other reasons.
Hmm.
And then eventually the government has to make laws and crack down, and that leads to more informational security until we get the next new technology that can transmit ideas to us in a different way. So, unfortunately, this is kind of cyclic. As human beings, we there is a very hairy relationship between truth and lies because of the
Well, and I
subjectivity of
mean,
morals.
like we were talking about a few minutes ago, like the lies are what sells, right?
Yeah.
Truth isn't interesting. And I mean, I think that's part of why the mainstream news environment has become what it's become, because reading headlines isn't entertaining. I like to use the argument that Fox News used. They're not a news agency, they're an entertainment industry. And news is not entertaining. I mean, we for those that don't know, we just got back from Ireland a couple weeks ago, and we would sit some nights in the hotels and watch
Oh,
their version
yeah.
of news in the hotel rooms at night, just to like get an idea of what life was like over there. And their news is it is they read a headline, moved on. Read a headline, said a couple sentences about what happened, moved on. It was wild seeing news again that was just, here's the news, and we're not going to talk anymore about it.
Guys, they spent more time on soccer than they did actual news, which
Yes.
over there they'd call football.
Like it is wild how much our news cycle has become dependent on having all the talking heads and all the pundits there to talk about why this thing is or isn't bad, or why the Democrats or the Republicans are or are not good
Yeah.
people. Like it's just a constant sharing of opinions and thoughts rather than factual, here is the news.
Yeah. Um, Now, some things to help out with that, I think. First thing would be, to be completely honest with you, look at some more European news, mainly
Mhm.
what Europe is saying about us. They're not as far along on the algorithm and audience driven misinformation spiral that we here in the United States are on, especially places like Ireland and such. So you can find a better news environment over in Western Europe,
Mhm.
to be completely honest with you. But also, even with our news, be very, very wary if you're watching, especially like cable news. Um, if they give you a headline and then they tell you what they think about that headline, well, let's say, well, I don't think that's very, or something like that. They're telling you what to think.
Mhm.
That is them editorializing it to sway your opinion in a certain direction or not. Fox News did it all the time when Tucker
Mhm.
Carlson was working. He'd show a headline, something like, well, here you see three transgender people beating up on a hospital worker. I don't think that's a very good use of our taxpayer payer dollars if they went to get surgery like that. Well, what does that have to, you're telling us what to think, Tucker. And
Mhm.
if you know, it's like a formula. He did it with almost every single headline. He would present the headline, tell you what he thought about it, which is what you should think about it. And then he'd bring on a talking head or two of the opposite side to argue
Mhm.
with, to grind down the us versus them fight of it.
Yeah.
And now that he's going in a totally different direction, who
Mhm.
knows what he's trying to do, but
Well, I mean, it's not just Tucker. Not
yeah.
I mean, he's a good example, but again, on both sides, they will present a story as here is the headline of the thing that is happening, and here's why this is either a good or a bad thing. It's not here's the news that is happening. Take the information and run with it. It's here's the information, and now here's the opinion. Like you're saying, here's how you should think about it. Like there's always a frame to the story that's either good or bad that doesn't leave space for just giving you room to even process the information to give you time to form an opinion on
Yep.
it before being told, here's what the opinion should be.
Yep. And very much on social media like
Mhm.
that's a good little tidbit for cable news. And on social media, be very, very wary of anyone telling you of any type of secret knowledge, any type of knowledge that other people don't know about.
Mhm.
For male oriented stuff, you'll hear a lot of, the experts don't want you to know about this. And on a lot of female oriented stuff, it's like, hey guys, this is stuff that no one's really been researching,
Mhm.
but way back in the day, women used to use this to do this, this, and this.
Mhm.
There's probably something they're not telling you.
Yeah, there's
And
probably either a reason we don't do it like that anymore or a reason that the experts aren't telling you about this thing is because it's not accurate.
yeah. So you really got Joe Rogan is a very, very big practitioner of the experts don't want you to know about this
Mhm.
stuff. Which, by the way, who are the experts? Who are this mythical
Yeah,
they that they're always referring to?
these mythical just like scientists that
Yeah.
just
Like
exist somewhere.
they have names, right? You can
The
look up their names and you can tell their name, like names and professions are public
Yeah, or at
information.
least give me like an organization or like a university. Give me like something to reference if you're gonna give me
Yeah.
a they don't want you to know this.
And don't say the World Health Organization. We're out of that now.
Yeah, we're not members anymore.
But be very, very careful of people telling you that they've got secret knowledge that they want to bestow upon
Mhm.
you. They probably don't have secret knowledge. They also probably don't want to dispose it to you out of the goodness of their heart.
Mhm.
This is probably something meant to catch the algorithm and to get you watching all the way through because there's an ad either in the beginning or the end.
Yeah.
And also be very, very aware of people that use us versus them
Mhm.
on you, especially on political news, where like I'll see it in a lot of conservative headlines, and even in quite a few left-leaning and liberal ones as well, where it'll be like, shocking conservative does this, or
Mhm.
like crazy liberal does that. And it's that labeling the political
Mhm.
affiliation of the person that did it beforehand that sets up the us and the them.
Mhm.
And that is supposed to automatically tell you which side you're supposed to be on.
Yeah.
You know, article of crazy liberal does something shocking is obviously for conservatives
Mhm.
to further misinform them to the point where they'll start thinking that every liberal is crazy and
Yeah.
that they have to be a conservative because
Mhm.
that's the only right side. And same thing for liberal programming. They'll show off the worst of the worst of conservative sects and movements,
Mhm.
or something like shocking conservative does this, or conservative beats up an entire crowd of teenagers, or something like that. And what they're trying to do is shock you into thinking that every single conservative is a monster and that you need to stay on the liberal and left side because they're the only side that has empathy anymore.
Mhm.
When the reality, as I've said previously, is a lot more complicated
Mhm.
and cannot just be answered by us versus them. They use
And I mean, if there is any us versus them in our society, it is 100% not left versus right. And as others around have said, I don't know if we've brought it up on the podcast, but it is the top versus the bottom.
yes,
we
yes.
we are all a lot closer, even the people that, upper middle class, even kind of pushing the edge of upper middle class to getting to the wealthy side, are all one big disaster away from being closer to the homeless guy on the street than we are a big, like, life-changing event that gives us as much money as Elon Musk has. Like,
Yeah.
this imaginary, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, if you just work hard you can, make a lot of money. That, I mean, that could be true to a certain extent, but when we say you can make a lot of money, like, we're talking maybe a couple $100,000, you can live comfortably. You do not get to the Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk status just by your pure good old boy hard work. Like, that's just not how it works.
Yeah. And don't absolutely don't get me wrong. All of this us versus them is mainly from politicians and billionaires and lobbying groups owned by billionaires who all have specific and different interests that they are pushing and using this red versus blue fight in order to push that. The reason why politicians tell you how bad the other side is because they want you to vote for them.
It, you could call it propaganda.
Yes, you could absolutely. Or the modern nowadays version of it,
Yeah.
misinformation. Since that we're all about squishing so many different meanings into one word nowadays.
Hmm.
But yeah, they will misinform you to get you to vote for them. A lobbying group will misinform you to get you to give money to them so that they can go give money to politicians to get them to vote the way that the lobbying group wants them to vote. And to be honest with you, a lot of it is really trying to keep the boat in the current direction that it's going. A lot of corporations really like the very low percentages for taxes that they pay. Because don't get me wrong, there'll be corporations that will constantly yell about you about how many countless millions and millions and billions they've paid in taxes. But you notice they're always saying the hard dollar amount. They're never saying the percentage. Because when you actually compare the percentage of taxes that they pay, that hard dollar amount, to the hard dollar amount of profit that they make every single year, it's chump change. It's pennies.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be what, the equivalent of, like, us paying a couple bucks a year in taxes.
Yeah, it would be the equivalent. Yeah, it would literally be the equivalent of me like being handing Uncle Sam $10 for my taxes every year. That's roughly the tax ratio that the richest of the rich pay in terms of taxes. It's so much so that they don't even really factor it into what they do anymore.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like, you see SpaceX launching rockets left, right, and center, and at this
Mhm.
point creating what are essentially modern company towns in Texas. But, you know, Elon Musk hasn't even mentioned, what his tax dollars are being used for.
Well, and what was that? I mean, I think it's been a few years ago now, but he, like, tweeted at some point or something, made a social media post or something a while ago saying that, like, someone come up with the numbers to, like, end world hunger and I'll, like, fund it. And someone was like, it would cost $40 billion. Like, this is a number that we know it would cost about $40 billion. And then Elon never said, I was joking though. That was just a hypothetical question.
Yeah,
So, like,
yeah.
obviously he does not care about
And with Elon
helping.
And if with Elon Musk, if you noticed, right when the left side of American politics started getting really, really mad at billionaires,
Mhm.
more so than they already are, suddenly he's donating hundreds of millions into Donald Trump's campaign, and suddenly he's all on board with conservatism when he used to be some soy drinking liberal from California.
Mhm.
Like, these billionaires do not care. They do not have a specific political leaning that they truly care about. They care about using the us versus them of politics to make as much money as they can, pay as little out as they have to into society, and eventually to, I guess, become untouchable. I don't know. None of them have
Yeah.
ever even talked about the end game. It's like we're on some infinite treadmill of
Yeah.
acquiring wealth for
Like,
them.
if your goal was to make money, congratulations, you did it. You can stop now. Like, you've done
Not
it.
not to make this ranting about billionaires, but just but
But
just
I mean, it kind of is.
but I mean, it's just because of the misinformation game, it'll make you think it is
Well,
one
and
thing when it is not.
when the billionaires are the ones buying up all of the companies the broadcasting networks that own the news outlets and buying the Wall Street journals and, like, are starting to insert themselves into the information, then like, it is billionaires talking about billionaires is starting to talk about the news cycle. I mean, they are inserting themselves into the environment.
And especially nowadays when Donald Trump very recently went to China, instead of bringing a bunch of State Department officials, he brought, what was it, like over 10 billionaires from
Uh-huh.
our
Yeah.
country
Yeah.
instead as his officials.
Hmm.
So we're not even pretending that billionaires are now
Yeah.
seen as
Well, and I
U.S.
mean,
officials.
the clip I think has gone viral at this point now, but the reporter asking him how much he considers the American people when negotiating with Iran, and he answered that he's not thinking about us at all. Like, if that doesn't tell you his opinion of the American people, I don't know what else will.
Yeah. So essentially, pay more attention to some European news. Stop getting into the us versus them trap. Stop listening to people that say they have mystical, forbidden knowledge or scientific knowledge that millions of other scientists around the world haven't somehow figured out.
And remember that you are not immune to propaganda. Like,
Yeah.
one of the biggest ways of fighting misinformation is the realization that maybe the information that I think I know isn't actually true, and being open to hearing the other side and hearing arguments against what you think you believe. Because what you've been taught might be wrong through no fault of your own. If you grew up in a household where all that was ever on the TV was Fox News and you don't know any better, like, and that's all you've been taught, then I can't blame someone for agreeing with the things that are said on Fox News if you've never been exposed to the other side.
Yeah.
So, being willing to have that discussion and just being willing to recognize maybe I was influenced or brainwashed in a certain way to think a certain thing, and maybe I need to reconsider my opinions and if that's something I actually believe or not.
And also, if you hear somebody give a simple answer to something that sounds complicated, maybe go look that up before you take them at face value. Like, if you're on the street and you hear somebody say, oh, well, this problem is happening because of crazy liberals, And if only we got all the liberals out, then we wouldn't have that problem. It's probably more complicated than that, and you should probably go look it up before you take that guy's word, because that guy has probably been us versus them to death and is probably listening to someone who is selling him misinformation to get him to think a certain way so that he'll continue watching the programming and
Mhm.
vote a certain way and be of a certain alignment. It it's a war out there for people's information, and you gotta watch for who wants your attention, essentially. It is not the olden day and age where you could use the excuse of, well, if they're on the platform, then that means they must be trustworthy.
Mhm.
No, that doesn't work on the internet anymore. All of these guys are free agents, essentially. Google does not claim any responsibility for what people says on its channel, because it also reserves the right to remove anybody
Mhm.
because it's private property. And since free speech only protects you from the government, free speech rules do not really apply on social media. That's just one last thing to grind in for all the free speech warriors out there. Social media is not free speech. It is private property owned by corporations. Just because it is not physical property in the world does not mean it is not private property. It is private data.
Well, and also to take it one step further, freedom of speech is just, like you said, freedom of any sort of persecution from the government for saying a thing. Freedom of speech does not protect you from the consequences of the public calling you an asshole. Like
Yeah.
that's not what freedom of speech is. It's not saying we have to sit back and let you say whatever you want because freedom of speech. It's you say your thing and then I'm allowed to say whatever I want back to your stupid thing.
And that's why conservatives getting banned on social media is not a free speech violation, but Hassan Piker getting subpoenaed for going to Cuba is.
That's a whole different.
We'll save that for later.
That can be a
Yeah.
future episode.
So with that, I'm going to catch you all next week then.
And if you have anything you want us to talk about, if you liked this format of us just talking, if you missed the format of us having a specific headline or thing going on to talk about, let us know, in the comments, at a party meeting, at a protest. Hunt us down, find us, let us know what your thoughts are, what you'd like to see more of.
Absolutely. We just need a break, guys.
Yeah, it's so overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just got to chat.
Right. Yeah. All right. Bye.
See you all next week.